He didn't see me, and I didn't want him to. I arrived 20 minutes early, clutching a floral cloth bag with the hand-stitched hem unraveling. The gym was already warm with bodies and buzzing chatter. Families had gathered in clusters, carrying flowers, balloons, posters that said things like, "You did it, Sarah," or "So proud of you, Jake." I didn't bring any of those, just a worn Bible and an old Kodak camera that might still work. I had dressed in my Sunday best, an old navy dress that used to fit better, a cardigan with a missing button, and my good flats. My hair was curled the way George always liked, soft and pinned up at the nape. My lipstick was one shade too bright, but I remembered my sister once said it made me look alive. Alive. That was what I wanted to feel today, even if it was from the shadows. The last row was near the back doors. Folding chairs creaked under weight and age. I sat down gently, knees aching, my spine adjusting to the hard metal. Around me, people were laughing, taking selfies, leaning into each other with affection that made my chest hollow. I didn't belong in the middle of that world. Not today. The last time Daniel had looked at Miral, I looked at Muaz the week before. We stood in our tiny kitchen. He was eating cereal straight from the box, his backpack slung over one shoulder like he couldn't wait to leave. "Ma," he said without eye contact, "I think maybe you shouldn't come." "Come where, sweetheart?" I had asked, though I already knew. "My graduation." I smiled like I hadn't heard him right. "Of course I'll come. I wouldn't miss it for the world." He finally looked up, his brows furrowed, jaw tight. "That's the thing. I don't want it to be awkward. I mean, everyone's parents are different. You're different." He didn't say poor. He didn't say old. He didn't say tired or broken or embarrassing. But I felt it. I could have told him I sewed his first Halloween costume by hand when we couldn't afford anything but fabric scraps. I could have reminded him how I worked triple shifts when he was sick and needed medicine we had to pay cash for. I could have told him about all the nights I skipped meals so he could have seconds. But I didn't, because none of that mattered now. Not to him. Not to the 17-year-old boy trying to find his place in a world that prized polish over pain. So I said, "All right," and nodded. "I understand." And I did, even if it cracked something deep inside. Still, I came. I watched the stage from far away, barely able to see the faces under the caps. The principal's voice boomed from the speakers as he welcomed everyone. Parents cheered, clapped, whistled. I clutched the program tighter. One by one, they called the names. Tyler Adams, Camila Brooks, Mason Carter. Each name drew applause and a flash of cameras. Some students danced across the stage, some threw peace signs, some barely smiled. Each one had someone yelling for them. Each one except mine. Daniel Evans. I held my breath. He walked across the stage tall and straight, in a borrowed gown I helped him 2 nights ago. His shoulders were broad, his eyes set forward, determined. I smiled. I didn't clap. I didn't cheer. I just watched. And then he was gone, blending into the crowd of graduates sitting below the podium. No one noticed the woman in the last row, her knuckles white around a folded program, her lips trembling with words she'd never say out loud. After the ceremony, families spilled into the parking lot, hugging and taking photos under the late afternoon sun. I stayed seated for a while, letting the wave of people pass, like letting a storm roll over before stepping outside. When I finally stood, my knees popped and my feet throbbed. I walked slowly to the edge of the lot, staying near the trees. I saw Daniel. He was with his girlfriend and her parents. They gave him a bouquet. The girl's mother kissed his cheek. He looked so happy, so free. I turned and walked home. That night, the house was too quiet. The graduation program sat on the kitchen table beside a cooling cup of tea. I stared at it, wondering how many mothers had to hide in the shadows of their child's milestones. I wasn't angry. Not really. Just mourning something I wasn't ready to lose. We used to be a team, Daniel and I. Just us against the world. When George died, Daniel was only 8. Too young to understand grief, but old enough to sense the hole it left behind. I remember him sleeping curled at the foot of my bed for weeks. I remember his little hands pressing folded dollar bills into my purse, thinking he was helping. He always had a heart too big for his chest. But as he grew, I saw the distance widen. He wanted more than I could give. Nicer clothes, the right shoes, a phone, a car. I tried. God knows I tried. But there are limits when your paycheck barely keeps the lights on. I'd found ways to help him feel like he belonged. Bargain store finds that passed for trendy, odd jobs to scrape together money for dance tickets or field trips. I baked for fundraisers. I sewed. I hustled. I prayed. And for a while, it worked. He fit in. He smiled. But high school is cruel. So is poverty. He stopped inviting me to things. School concerts. Parent nights. He said he didn't want the attention. Said it was fine if I couldn't make it. But I knew. He was ashamed. Ashamed of the cracked linoleum on our kitchen floor. Ashamed of our rusted old car that coughed to life on cold mornings. Ashamed of the mother who smelled faintly of bleach and dollar store perfume. Still, I loved him. Love doesn't need an invitation. Love sits in the last row, silent and unseen, and claps with its heart. The next morning, I found a note on the fridge. Went to grad party. Might stay at Josh's. Don't wait up. No, thanks for coming. No, sorry. No, I love you. Just absence, scribbled in blue ink. I spent the day cleaning the house. It was what I did when my heart felt too big for my chest. Scrubbed the sink. Polished the wood floors. Dusted the picture frames. One frame in particular stopped me. It was Daniel, age 5, wearing an oversized superhero cape I made from a curtain. He stood in the backyard, arms wide, beaming with pride. That day, he told me, "One day I'll be famous and buy you a house with stairs." We'd laughed. I held the frame to my chest, pressing it close like it might pulse with memory. By dusk, the house was dark. No headlights in the driveway. No sound of the door unlocking. I sat at the kitchen table again, tea untouched. And then just after 10 the front door opened. His steps were hesitant. He smelled like cheap beer and grass, and something bitter beneath it. He paused in the kitchen doorway, hair tousled, cap still on his head. "You were there, weren't you?" he asked. I looked up, startled. He leaned against the doorframe. "I saw someone in the back. I thought maybe. I don't know." I didn't speak. He swallowed hard. "Did you really come?" I nodded. I wouldn't miss it. His eyes filled, just for a second. "Why didn't you say something?" "You asked me not to," I said gently. He stepped forward, shoulders sagging. "I was stupid. You were scared." Silence stretched between us like fabric unraveling. He whispered, "I'm sorry, Ma." I stood slowly, walked over, and touched his cheek. His eyes closed. "You don't ever have to be sorry for needing to grow," I said. "But I'll always be in the last row, cheering. Always." Daniel didn't say anything after that. He just stood there, looking at me like he wasn't sure if he should fall into my arms or walk out the door again. So I made the choice for him. I opened my arms, and he stepped in. It wasn't dramatic. No tears. No grand apologies. Just a quiet, trembling hug that said everything words couldn't. His arms wrapped around me like he was 5 years old again. His head rested on my shoulder, heavy and tired. "I didn't think you'd really come," he whispered. "I told you I wouldn't miss it," I said. His breath hitched. I thought you'd finally give up." "I never will." He pulled back slowly, eyes glassy. "Ma, I don't know what's wrong with me. I didn't even feel proud today. Everyone was cheering and celebrating, and all I could think about was how I pushed you away." "You're still growing," I said. "Sometimes that hurts." He rubbed his face. "I thought I wanted to fit in so bad. But now that it's over, I feel hollow." I nodded. That's the thing about chasing other people's approval. It never fills you. We stood in the kitchen for a moment longer, the silence no longer heavy, just honest. "I should have told them you were my mother," he said. "But you did," I replied, even without words. He blinked. "How?" "You looked for me in the crowd." His lips quivered, and he gave a small nod. "Do you still have the camera?" I smiled faintly and reached into the cabinet drawer. I pulled out the old Kodak. "Don't know if it works. Might be out of film." He took it gently, inspecting it like something sacred. "Let's take one anyway." "In the dark kitchen?" I chuckled. He shrugged. "It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want it to be real." So we took a photo. Just the two of us, in the dim light of a kitchen that smelled of lemon cleaner and tea, where love had lived quietly for years. The days after graduation were quiet again, but not in the same way. Something had shifted. Daniel didn't disappear so quickly anymore. He stayed for dinner. He asked about my day. He even helped with dishes, drying plates with a towel too small for his hands. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the neighbor's trees, he asked, "Ma, do you remember when we used to go to the library every Saturday?" I nodded. "You always wanted to check out the space books. Said you'd be an astronaut." He laughed. I think I just like the quiet. You always like quiet, I said. He turned to me, more serious now. You think it's too late for me to figure things out? You're 17, Daniel. He shook his head. I don't mean college or a job or all that. I mean, who I am. I don't want to be someone who hides his own mother. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. Then don't be. He nodded slowly. I want to make you proud. You already have. He looked at me. Even when I told you not to come? Especially then, I said. Because you were scared and you were honest. That's not weakness. That's just being human. His shoulders eased, and he leaned back against the porch railing. You know, I've been thinking of writing, telling stories, maybe even about us. I looked at him, heart swelling. You always were a storyteller. You used to narrate your dreams when you were little, like bedtime wasn't finished unless you got the last word. He smiled. Still feel like that sometimes. Then write, I said. Even if no one reads it. Even if it's messy. I'm scared. That means it matters. A few weeks later, he started waking up early again, not to go out, but to read. He dug through old boxes in the attic, pulled out his childhood journals, my husband's poetry books, even my grocery list notebook. Words are everywhere, he said one morning. Even the boring ones feel like part of the story now. I just smiled. Let him find his path. He started volunteering at the community center, reading to kids during the summer program. I watched him from the back, sometimes always from the back, reading with his hands, his heart, his whole voice. The kids leaned in like he was casting spells. One afternoon, after the session, he came up to me with a look I couldn't read. There was this boy, he said, maybe 7 or 8. Asked if my mom read to me growing up. I nodded. You remember what you said? He hesitated. I said, yeah, my mom read me life. And then he reached for my hand. Right there, in the middle of the playground. In front of the other volunteers and the kids and their parents. He didn't care who saw. That moment was louder than any graduation cheer. One evening, we sat on the floor of the living room going through old photos. Some were faded. Some stuck together from years in a dusty drawer. There were birthdays with dollar store cakes, a beach day where it rained, Christmas mornings with mismatched pajamas. God, I used to be so small, he said, holding one where he was toothless and grinning. You were my little miracle, I said. You still think that? He asked softly. Every day. He looked up. I'm thinking about college. I raised an eyebrow. I thought you said you weren't ready. I'm not. Not in the way they want me to be. But I want to go. For me. Not for a diploma, but for stories. For people. I felt tears rising again. This time I didn't blink them back. Where? I asked. Anywhere that'll take a kid with a pen and a past. Well, I said, squeezing his knee, they'd be lucky to have you. Weeks turned into months. Summer faded. Daniel applied to a small liberal arts college 2 towns over. Nothing fancy, but the essay he wrote? It was about me. Not the sainted version. Not this single mother did it all trope. It was honest. Raw. It talked about how I scrubbed floors and cried quietly in the laundry room. How I burned rice once because I was thinking too hard about the bills. How I sat in the last row of his graduation, unseen but never absent. He didn't ask for my permission to write it. But when he handed it to me in a sealed envelope, he said, whatever they decide, this is the truth. I read it at the kitchen table with the kettle still whistling behind me. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry the way I needed to. He had seen me, and more than that had honored me. The acceptance letter came on a Tuesday. It was raining, the kind of soft, steady rain that made everything feel suspended, like time itself was taking a breath. Daniel burst through the front door with soaked sneakers and a look on his face I hadn't seen since he was little, and found a $5 bill in the grocery store parking lot. They said yes, he said, holding the envelope high. Ma, they said yes. I stood frozen for a moment, the dish towel still in my hands. They want me. They read the essay, and they want me. And I wanted to scream. I wanted to dance. But all I did was reach for him, arms trembling, and whisper, of course they do. He spun me around the kitchen like we were in one of those old black and white movies we used to watch on Saturday nights. The floor creaked. My feet protested. But I didn't care. My son, the boy who once told me I was an embarrassment, was now saying I am enough with every word, every breath, every step forward. Later that night, as he packed up a few things in the corner of his room, I sat on his bed and watched. The posters were still up, faded rock bands, constellations, the old dream board we made when he was 10. You ever think about what it'll be like? I asked. He paused. Being on my own. He shrugged. Sometimes. I get scared. I smiled. Good. That means you're paying attention. He zipped his duffel and looked over at me. I don't want to leave you, Ma. You're not leaving, I said. You're becoming. He sat next to me. You really think I can do this? I know you can. What if I fail? I leaned in and kissed his temple. Then you fail with grace and try again. That's what we do. The night before he left for school, we stayed up late. The kitchen was warm from the oven I'd made his favorite lasagna, even though the cheese was more expensive now. We didn't say much. Just listened to the radio. Let the silence be a kind of comfort. He pulled out a small wrapped box and slid it across the table to me. What's this? I asked. Open it. Inside was a frame. Simple wood. No glass. Inside was the photo we'd taken the night of his graduation in kitchen light. Blurry edges. The two of us smiling in that quiet, tired, grateful way only survivors smile. I traced the corner of it with my finger. I love it. I'm going to keep the same one in my dorm, he said. So it's like you're still there, sitting in the last row. My throat tightened. I won't be in the last row anymore, Daniel. He looked at me. I'll be right beside you. Every time you stand up. Every time you speak out. Every time you write something true. He swallowed hard. Promise. Promise. He left on a bright morning in late August. The car was packed. I stood by the driveway with a thermos of coffee and an aching chest. He hugged me longer than I expected, longer than I could bear. Don't forget to eat, I said. Don't forget to rest, he replied. And call me, I added. Every week, he smiled. Every day, I corrected. He laughed. Okay, every day. I watched him pull away, the taillights blinking like a heartbeat in retreat. And then the silence came. This time it wasn't heavy. It was sacred. I walked back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and looked around the house. Still, quiet, full of memory. I made tea. I opened my Bible. And then I opened the notebook Daniel left me on the counter, with a note written inside the cover. For every story you never got to tell. Start here. That fall, I wrote my first essay. It was clumsy, sentimental, too long, but it was honest. I sent it to the local paper. They published it under the title, The Last Row, A Mother's View of Graduation. People noticed. Strangers stopped me at the grocery store, saying it made them cry. Some sent letters. One woman even brought me flowers. But I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for the girl I used to beta, one who was scared she'd never be enough. The one who cried over overdue bills. The one who thought no one would ever see her. Daniel called the next day after it printed. His voice cracked. I read it out loud in class, he said. I couldn't get through the last paragraph. People clapped, Ma. Not bad for a dishwasher and dropout, huh? I joked. He laughed. You're a writer. I shook my head. I'm your mother. That's enough. No, he said firmly. You're both. As winter came, he brought home new stories. About professors who challenged him. About poems that made him cry. About roommates who didn't understand what it meant to grow up poor. He never apologized for me again. At the end of the semester, he invited me to his campus for the reading of a story he'd written. It was part of a class showcase. I hesitated. I don't want to make you nervous. He looked me in the eye. Ma, I want you in the front row this time. I wore my navy dress again. The one from his high school graduation. It still fit barely. I pinned a brooch to the collar and curled my hair the way I used to. The auditorium was small, intimate. Students filed in with friends and professors. Some wore boots. Some wore scars. All of them carried stories. When Daniel took the stage, he held the mic like a lifeline. His paper shook in his hands. But his voice didn't. He read about a woman who lived on rice and resilience. Who mopped the floors of wealthy people's kitchens and still came home smiling. Who sat in the last row of a gymnasium and saw her son become someone brave. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. At the end, the room was silent. Then came the applause. Loud. Sustained. Earned. I stood. And this time he saw me. That night, walking to the car, he put his arm around me. Thank you, he said. For what? I asked. For staying. Even when I pushed you away. That's what mothers do, I replied. No, he said. That's what you do. I looked at him, this boy, now nearly a man, and realized something. Love isn't loud. It's not showy. It's not always even recognized. But it's constant. Like breath. like heartbeat, like the last row quiet, steady, always there. Later that night, as I lay in the guest bed of his tiny off-campus apartment, I stared at the ceiling fan turning above me and listened to the sounds of his quiet typing from the living room. The clack of the keyboard, the occasional sig hit was like a lullaby of becoming. I remembered when he was 10, sitting cross-legged on the floor with crayons and construction paper, declaring he'd write a book one day and dedicate it to the strongest woman in the world. I had laughed then. I didn't feel strong. I felt tired. I felt invisible. But children have a way of seeing the truth before we do. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I let myself feel it pride, deep and overwhelming. Not the kind that puffs the chest or demands a stage, but the quiet kind. The kind that settles in your bones and whispers, "You made it." You both did. The next morning, I woke early and started breakfast before he stirred. I found eggs and bread in the fridge, coffee in the tin above the sink. His apartment was small but cozy, books stacked in corners, post-it notes on the walls, a single photo of us taped beside his laptop screen. He came out rubbing his eyes, shirt wrinkled from sleep. "You didn't have to cook," he mumbled. I smiled. "I did it for me." He poured coffee and sat down at the small table across from me. "Last night meant a lot." "I know." He studied me for a second. "I keep thinking about the past. Not with shame this time. With clarity." I raised my eyebrows. "You know that Christmas when I said I didn't want to decorate the tree because it was embarrassing we used popcorn strings instead of ornaments? I hated myself for that after. I remember you cried, quietly, in the kitchen when you thought I'd gone to bed." I looked down at my cup. "I remember too." He reached across the table and touched my hand. "You gave me joy even when you had none left for yourself. That's what love does." He swallowed hard. "I want to do that for others. That's what my writing is going to be about. Ordinary people who never get a front row, who sit in silence and still carry the whole room." I squeezed his fingers gently. "Then you'll never run out of stories." A few weeks later, he came home for winter break. The town hadn't changed, but I had. Or maybe, for the first time, I allowed myself to see this life for what it was: not a failure, not a waiting room, but a foundation. I had built something here. I had raised a boy into a man. I had earned my place at the table. He brought with him a copy of the school's literary journal. His story, the one he read that night, was printed in the center. Across the top of the page, in bold letters, was the title, "The Last Row." I ran my fingers over the ink. "You kept the title." "Of course," he said. "It's where it all began." One morning, near Christmas, we went for a walk through the neighborhood. Snow had dusted the streets like powdered sugar. Children were throwing snowballs and shouting with laughter. Someone had lit up their porch with blinking lights shaped like reindeer. "Do you remember that winter when the heater broke and we all slept in the living room by the oven?" he asked. "Sure do. We built a tent out of bed sheets and called it Camp Fire Hazard." He laughed. "I thought it was the greatest adventure in the world. I was terrified you'd get sick. But I didn't. I got stories instead." We stopped by the old oak tree near the park. Its branches were bare, but there was something proud in its posture, like it knew it had survived another season. "I used to think we were unlucky," he said softly. "That life gave us less than everyone else. And now, I think we had everything, just in different wrapping." I nodded. "You only start to see clearly when you stop comparing." He glanced at me sideways. "That a quote from your essay?" I grinned. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just wise." He bumped his shoulder into mine. "You're definitely that." On Christmas morning, I woke up to the smell of cinnamon. Daniel had made French toast, burned on the edges, but soaked with effort. He had placed a single gift on the table, wrapped in newspaper and tied with string. I opened it slowly. Inside was a book. Not just any book. A printed, bound collection of essays mine. He had taken every piece I'd written since that first newspaper column, formatted them, edited them, added an introduction he wrote himself. "This is yours, Ma," he said. "You're not just my mother. You're an author now." I stared at the cover. "The Last Row, Essays from a Kitchen Table." My name was in bold. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Say you'll keep writing." "I will." "Say you'll believe it." I met his eyes. "I'm trying." "That's enough," he said. "Trying is holy." The new year came quietly. Daniel returned to school. I returned to my routine, but something was different. I had a schedule now. I wrote every morning, between making breakfast and watering the plants. I submitted essays. I even started a small blog. People left comments. Strangers shared their own stories of silence, sacrifice, and survival. One woman wrote, "Your words helped me forgive my daughter." Another, "I didn't know anyone else sat in the back row. Thank you for seeing us." And I thought maybe that's all any of us want. To be seen, to be known, to be named without shame. Daniel's final semester of freshman year ended with a surprise. I was working in the garden when I heard a car door slam. I wiped my hands on my apron and turned to see him standing there, not with a suitcase, but with a folder in his hand and a strange, excited look on his face. "You're not supposed to be home yet," I said. "I got something to show you." He handed me the folder. Inside was a letter from a publisher. They had read his story. They wanted more. A collection. A memoir. Something rooted in truth, they said. He was trembling. "Ma, they want to publish my book. Our story." I clutched the folder like it was gold. "They want to call it The Last Row," he added. I told them that title already belongs to someone. I looked at him, blinking away the blur in my eyes. "It can belong to both of us." He smiled. "Yeah, I think that's what it was always meant to be." The book came out the following spring. It arrived in a brown box left by the mailman on a windy Thursday morning. I opened it at the kitchen table, alone, fingers trembling as I peeled back the cardboard. There it was. The Last Row by Daniel Evans, with a small dedication on the inside cover. "For my mother, who sat in silence so I could find my voice. This book is your echo." I held it to my chest and let the moment wash over me. All the years, all the unspoken nights, the coupons clipped, the pain swallowed, the kindnesses unnoticed. They were here, now printed on pages, etched into spine and cover, living proof that love leaves a mark even when no one applauds it. The book wasn't flashy. It wasn't on bestseller lists. But it found its way into hands that needed it. Book clubs, libraries, teachers, nurses, people who had sat in the last row themselves and thought they were alone. And suddenly, they weren't. Daniel came home for the launch event the university hosted. It was a modest reading at the Student Center, filled with classmates, professors, and a few curious townsfolk. When he stepped up to the podium, he wore a navy button-up shirt and a nervous smile. He didn't read from the book that night. He read a letter. "To the woman who gave me my name," he began, voice steady, "and let me grow into it even when it hurt." He spoke of childhood, of anger and shame, of distance, then of realization, redemption. He spoke of watching me live quietly, and how, over time, he came to understand that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just shows up. Every day. And finally, he said, "The last row isn't where the forgotten sit. It's where the strongest stand back and let others shine." My mother didn't just raise me. She taught me how to see. The room rose in a standing ovation. He looked right at me the whole time. And this time I stood, too. Life didn't suddenly become glamorous after the book. We didn't move to a mansion. We didn't go on world tours. We just lived. But now, we lived with light. Daniel graduated college a year early. He came home and taught part-time while writing full-time. He didn't chase fame. He chased stories. Real ones. About nurses, janitors, cafeteria workers, war veterans, single mothers. And me? I kept writing too. My essays became a regular column in the local newspaper. I spoke at libraries and women's groups. Sometimes I'd be invited to schools where young people asked me what it was like to raise a child alone. I always said the same thing. It's like planting a tree in a storm. You don't know if it'll survive. You just keep digging, watering, hoping. And if one day it blooms, you don't take credit. You just sit in the back and smile. One day, a letter arrived from a high school across the state. The principal had read Daniel's book and wanted to invite us both to speak at their graduation. Daniel hesitated. "Ma, you don't have to go. I can do it." I looked at him and smiled. "I'm coming." When we arrived, the gymnasium was nearly identical to the one from years ago. Same metal chairs, same echoing mic, same banners strung across the rafters. But this time, I sat in the front row. Daniel took the stage as keynote speaker. He looked over the sea of caps and gowns and said, "When I graduated, I didn't want my mother to come. I thought she'd embarrass me. But she came anyway. She sat in the last row. And that changed everything." He paused, then looked down at me. "If you remember anything from today, remember this. The people in the last row are often the ones who carried you here. Don't forget them. Don't silence them. Honor them." Afterward, students lined up to speak with us. Some cried. Some shared stories of parents they'd pushed away. One girl whispered to me, "I didn't want my dad here today, but now, I'm going to find him." Daniel put his arm around me on the way back to the car. "You did that," he said. "No," I replied. "We did." A few years passed. The book stayed in print, modestly successful, still passed from hand to hand like a secret treasure. It made its way into hospitals, shelters, prisons, wherever someone needed to feel less invisible. Daniel married a teacher he met during a school visit. Her name was Anna. She had laugh lines around her eyes and a voice that always felt like morning. They bought a small house a few blocks from me. Nothing fancy, but full of warmth, full of books, full of life. On the day their daughter was born, me, first grandchild, Daniel walked into the delivery room, took my hand, and whispered, "She's going to know you, not as a shadow, but as her story." And when they placed that tiny girl in my arms, I held her like I'd waited a lifetime. Because I had. Now I'm older. My hands ache sometimes. My knees creak. But my heart is fuller than ever. I still sit in the back sometimes. At church. At school plays. At community meetings. But not because I'm hiding. Because I've learned that sitting in the last row doesn't mean you are less. It means you've lived long enough to know that love isn't always in the spotlight. Sometimes it's in the quiet, in the waiting, in the showing up again and again. I think often about that first graduation, the shame in his voice, the ache in mine, and I thank God I went anyway. Because that choice, that small, painful choice to love without condition, changed the shape of both our lives. If I could go back in time and speak to that woman sitting in the last row, hands shaking, eyes stinging with tears, I'd whisper, "Hold on. He will see you. One day he will see you." And then I'd smile. Because he did.